It's such a blessing and an honor to be here to share in this amazing anniversary of the First Baptist Church. And I'm just very honored to be here. When Paula contacted us about me sharing my testimony on this day, it has been incredible, the journey that the Lord has taken me on to get to this day. I've always heard the phrase that the Christian life is kind of like an onion, that the closer we get to Him, the more layers that are peeled off of our lives. And so that's kind of the journey that I've been on. I believe with all my heart that my Father did heal me. However, the interesting thing is, I have absolutely no memory of the injury. But I would like to share this morning the memories that I do have of last year. And there are 5 strong memories that are very real to me. On May the 24th, 2018, I remember getting up that morning and going to an awards assembly at the elementary school where 3 of my grandchildren were attending. And that's Charlie and Jenny Ruth and Jessica. I remember seeing my daughter, Brooke, my daughter-in-law, Melissa, and my son, Wes, at that assembly. Then I left the elementary school to go run some errands that day. The next memory I have was at least 2.5 months later. I do not remember surgeries, broken ribs, ambulance rides, medical plane flights, nor do I remember the pain and suffering that my family went through. These are the memories that I do have. Number 1, I remember being very confused. Number 2, I remember being very uncomfortable. And number 3, I remember being extremely homesick. And number 4, I knew that people were praying for me and my family. I remember lots of beautiful flower arrangements and cards, and Gary got phone calls and texts. I knew people were praying for me. The 5th memory I will share just a little bit later. I did not know where I was or why I was there. I am so thankful that God laid on Gary's heart to have me taken to the Craig Spinal Cord and Brain Injury Rehabilitation Hospital in Englewood, Colorado. But even in that, God orchestrated the whole plan, because the protocol to get into the Craig, they sent a woman, her name was Leanne, that she would interview the patient and the family. And so she had come, but she told Gary that it didn't look like they were going to accept me for 2 reasons. Number 1, my age, and number 2, the extent of the injury. So Gary explained to me that he and Wes were standing outside my hospital room in Amarillo, and a doctor walked by that didn't have anything to do with my case, but he knew Wes, and he said, Wes, what are you doing? And so Wes explained to him what had happened to me, and then told him that his dad was trying to get me in the Craig, but it didn't look like they were going to accept me. And this doctor said, well, my wife just happens to be a sorority sister of the lady that does the interviews. Let me see what I can do. And by the end of that day, they had called Gary and said, we're going to accept Jody. Can you have her here Wednesday? And he said, how about Monday? And she said, can you honestly arrange that and have her ready? And he said, I will have her ready. So I checked into the Craig Hospital on June the 18th, 2018. Now, while I was there, again, I had no memories up till the end of July. And so about that time, I was semi-coherent and able to understand some things. And Gary said, I will answer any questions you have, and I had a bunch. Brooke and Melissa, my daughter and daughter-in-law, were so good to send me family pictures to help me remember my life. that was part of the therapy, is just remembering my family and their birthdays. And I was so thankful for that, to have those pictures. But Gary also explained what had happened to me. I will be forever thankful for how he answered that question when I said what happened. After he explained the circumstances, I immediately asked him, "What are you going to do to that young man?" Gary explained to me that he had no desire to ruin the life of a 19-year-old. He went on to say, "Who of us at 19 has not made mistakes?" Which that kind of brought something up to me, because the last time that Gary and I stood together on this pulpit it's just 3 months short of 49 years ago. But Gary was 19 when he said "I do" right here. So I had to make sure that wasn't one of the mistakes he made at 19 years of age. But also, when I think about that day in December 21st, 1970, God knew that man who stood here with me nearly 49 years ago and said those vows, God knew that man would keep those vows. And the vows that he made to me, for richer, for poorer, and for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, he truly honored those vows. God also knew on that date in 1970, he knew that May the 24th, 2018 was going to happen. And he knew that this man would take care of me, and he did. The most important thing Gary wanted was for my brain to heal, and he knew that anger and bitterness would not be conducive to healing. And I am so grateful for the decision he made not to press charges. Then Paula texted Gary this past summer and asked about me giving my testimony. As I prayed about this and sought God's leadership and what to say, the layers began to peel off my life. Gary and I joined First Baptist Church of Amarillo 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years in November. And there's a class that new members take called Discover Now, and they just kind of tell you about the facility and their ministries and the staff. But one of the comments that Dr. Batson made at the end of that class was, he said, "For the life of me, I cannot understand why anyone living within 30 minutes of this church would not be bringing their children here to be taught the Bible, learning all the stories in the Old and the New Testament, the scriptures and scripture memory, etc., that the children learn here." He said, "We have an amazing children's ministry." I immediately thought to myself when he said these things, I grew up in a church just like that. And I'm so thankful for that. I remember all the wonderful teachers that I had at this church. In Sunday school, Jenny Ruth Waters and Pat Waters. And you wonder why your name is Jenny Ruth. That woman had such an effect and such an influence on my life. I'm so thankful to God that I had her for a teacher. The training union with Bob and Bobby Dillman and Charles and Roberta Vignal. Vacation Bible schools, GAs with Sue Hobdy, and then Tommy and Sue during the youth group, the youth revivals. Panfork, which I have a grandson that went to Panfork this summer. And just all the good times that we had and the good teachers we had. I'm so thankful for all of that. But then I remember also that Sally Dillman, Eves, and I accepted Christ on the same Sunday. And then Brother Nolan baptized both of us at the same time, or not at the same time, but on the same night. But I also remember Brother Nolan on a Sunday night church service. He said out loud, "There is a 6-foot-tall blonde in a red dress that better start paying attention." And those sitting next to her, ouch. There was only one 6-foot-tall blonde that I knew, and she did happen to have a red dress on that night, and I was sitting right beside her. And then there was the Sunday night that I went to get a Coke with Gary, and he had me home at 9 o'clock because that was the school night curfew, and I was never late. But I walked in the door, and my dad jumped on me like a dog on a bone. And I just wasn't used to that. It was always Bill that was in trouble. But when he finished chewing me out, he said, "What makes you think it's okay to skip church? You know where you're supposed to be on Sunday night." I very respectfully said, "Dad, if you would have looked at the front of the church instead of watching who did and who did not come in the back door, you would have seen that I was playing the piano." Now, I will say this, the piano playing at the First Baptist Church has been very much upgraded since those days. Well, I said earlier that I would tell you what the fifth memory was. And this is it. The fifth memory was the hardest, the most difficult for me to understand. Last summer at the Craig, late in the month of July, horrible memories started plaguing me day after day. It was a memory that left me sobbing, not just soft tears flowing down my cheek, but it left me sobbing. But it was the memory of the day of the death of our mother. And please understand, it's not that I ever, during this time, had memories of her voice or seeing her face. It was only the memory of the day of her death. This troubled me so much. I was told by one of the doctors at the Craig that, we have short-term memory and long-term memory, and when you have trauma to the brain, short-term memories lay down and long-term memories pop up. So he was not at all surprised that I was having these memories. And that was interesting, but it just would not satisfy me as an answer of why. I even thought, Lord, why are you letting these memories come? It's not like a day I'm ever going to forget, but I just couldn't understand why I was having these memories. When I came home, my pastor, Dr. Batson, came to see me, and I told him about these thoughts. And he told me, just don't fight the tears. He said, just let them flow. Maybe God is just giving you a time to remember your grief. And so I still was not satisfied. I just wanted to know why they were happening. And then one day, Brooke told me, she said, "Mom, I think you crammed all of your feelings about losing your mother way down deep into your memory so you didn't have to think about what happened." And I know this is true, but I still could not see any purpose in these horrifying memories. A couple of months after being home, the memories left me, but still I wanted to know why they came in the first place. And I just want to say, because I know so many people have gone on to be with the Lord, but our dad remarried, and one of the biggest blessings that we got was a sister and a brother, Debbie and Kim, and to this day we're all still very close and love each other very much. But then Paula texted about this testimony. As I began writing my thoughts out, I knew that I had to mention how dear this church had been to our family during that loss in our life. You ministered to us with love, tears, food, hugs. You were the hands and feet of Christ to us during this time. So as I was writing and thinking on these things, a light came on in my mind. When this happened 54 years ago, I poured my heart and soul into this church. This church was like a ship that was anchored to Christ in my life. The GAs, Panfort, Glorietta, youth revivals, the youth group, Sunday school, training union, the Sunday night piano playing. This body of Christ was so much more than a Sunday place to go. I remember the wonderful revivals with Boyce Evans and Preacher Halleck. And to this day, Olivia, that verse about in peace and safety, I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me to dwell in safety, came from Preacher Halleck in like 1967. but I still remembered those things. And then the one on traveling from Psalms 123:8, that you'll be with me on my going out and my coming in from this time forth and forevermore. So there's just been wonderful things in this church that are still with me today. I just felt so blessed because I knew that God had carried me through those years. And then and only then, I understood all the horrific thoughts I had had at the Craig. While I was working on this testimony, I was out in the country, and God's Spirit spoke to my spirit and said, "Did I not carry you through that dark, horrible time in your life?" And then a split second later, the Spirit continued, "And on May the 24th, 2018, did I not carry you through this dark and fearful time in your life?" Even though I have no memory of the injury, my sweet niece, Macy, said to me about 4 weeks ago, God was not just carrying you through this past year. He was also carrying Gary, Brooke, and Wes, and all of your family, and all of my extended family. And Macy said, "You don't remember your pain or your injury, but we all do, and we were all hurting for you." So God was speaking it so clearly to me that he truly did carry me through both of these dark times, and I know he did. My prayer is that as blessed as my family's lives have been, that we glorified God in times of suffering also. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, be it suffering, do all for the glory of God." I want my Father in heaven to find me thankful, find me grateful, and find me on my knees. Thank you, church, because I know this church body prayed for us during this time. Thank you so much.